Welcome to Merrily End. My name's Mark Machado. I'm in Yala, or just outside Yala actually, and I am joined by Sri Lanka's number one journalist, Estelle Vasudevan, and my cousin, the Professor Cricketology. Sorry, it's been a few days since a couple of weeks now since our last pod. We took a bit of a break for Christmas. I had to go to Melbourne and to Sri Lanka, a bit of heaven and hell. You know what it's like. Obviously, if you're from Melbourne in Australia, that is just a pure cricket reference. I love Australia; it's great. Tim Tams are amazing. Vegemite is incredible, and we are back here to discuss Sri Lanka's unsuccessful tour of New Zealand. We are recording this hours after they lost the second ODI against New Zealand. I don't want to say I told you so, but Dominic, yet again, they have gone abroad on a one-day tour, on a red ball tour. It doesn't matter what format it is, and just not done a lot, have they?
No, they have not. They had that kind of strong performance in the dead rubber, the third T20, where the batters clicked, but the pressure was off. And it kind of shows that there's a mentality issue going on here. There's some struggles. The talent is certainly there, but they just haven't put it together. They've really, really struggled with handling pace in the early overs. They've lost 4 wickets inside of the power play for something like 20 or so runs in the last 2 matches. And I think the thing that's concerning, there was a stat that popped up on Twitter or X or whatever you want to call it, that Sri Lanka have not won an ODI series away from home against a top 8 ODI side since 2014. It's been more than a decade, to put it into perspective. And that simply is not good enough. And I think it makes us want to think about what we're doing at home when we're winning, right? And we've shown and we've talked about how we've won, I think, 8 or 9 straight ODI series at home since 2021. But it is not paying off abroad. And we need a real rethink about how we prepare for those abroad series. And if we want to be a competitive white ball side, I'd say the red ball side has been a little bit better against good teams abroad. We need to really rethink our strategies.
Estelle, what's going wrong here? Because you look at that squad and you think, right, decent players, they've all done at points of their career, they've all done stuff. I was watching today and I saw Chamindu gets out, Hasaranga comes in, and you think, right, this could be a spectacular comeback. And then, kind of classic, first ball he doesn't do much, second ball he gets bowled, right? And you're like, what? It's beyond frustrating now because you're like this group of players we know are talented, but for whatever reason the fine tuning isn't happening, and when they're hitting the pitch, they're not. It was a case of they weren't winning, or we felt they weren't winning big games and tests in major tournaments. Now it feels they're just not winning at all away from home.
Yeah, that's the big concern, isn't it? And like so many people have brought up the conditions. How do we adjust to conditions overseas when we don't face anything similar in Sri Lanka? I think in New Zealand, the added kind of challenge is that it is cold and it is windy. There is a photographer from Sri Lanka who is in New Zealand at the moment called Samira Piris. What he seemed to say was that
Friend of the show,
the
friend of the
first
show, we should say.
friend of the show, it was very, very, very cold in the first game, and that it was difficult to handle even for Sri Lankans living there. But when I hear things like that, you've got to also question that. Look, if India loses in New Zealand, is that something they're going to talk about? And I'm not trying to be overly critical of the team because I didn't see anyone bring up the weather or anything like that, but it's simply part of the job, right? That you are going to come up against conditions and environments that you might not be accustomed to, but everything is about how you adapt. So if you look at teams coming to Sri Lanka, I think in a sense they won't be too displeased about facing spin friendly conditions because it gives them an opportunity also to work on that side of the game where you're not going to be able to make a pitch like what you get at Kittarama in New Zealand, right? So it does give them that opportunity. So I think there's still, there was this whole, all the praise coming in, people talking about Sanath as if it was just as he came that the ODI team was doing well, when the actuality was that they'd had unbeaten runs at home over the last couple of years, right? So I think that there is no and and it feels weird saying this as someone who is in the media industry, but I feel like there's no one that can hold someone like Sanat Jayasuriya accountable, right? um, or the management, or how things are run, because everyone seems to be so hell-bent on saying good things about it. It's good to be positive, but also at the same time, and I mean, this isn't like, just in Sri Lanka, you see it in a lot of countries, right, where people don't want to be critical, but the value of criticism is that you can change the way you're doing things and make adjustments. Looking back at Sanat's tenure, like, if I know I criticized it at the time, but when we beat India, you can justify the conditions that were prepared, in that, okay, look, Sri Lanka have not beaten India in this many years, and India is is probably the best white ball, or was the best white ball team in the world at that point. So winning against them, in no matter how you do it, would be a big achievement, right? So you could write that off and say that it is about confidence and getting the team into kind of that rhythm of winning. But that extended to many many series afterwards, and we might be, and it's just one series in New Zealand, but we might be seeing the results of doing that now, where again, as we have struggled in the past, we continue to struggle overseas, particularly in like batting friendly conditions.
I think the frustrating thing for me is there's two things, right, as a fan. Is firstly, I'm not seeing kind of improvement as a unit, right? I think you could, if you drill into the data, you can maybe suggest some players are improving kind of series and series. I kind of think that about Pattern. I kind of feel like we're probably in, if not approaching prime Kusal, as in Kusal Mendes, and I think Kamindu, his knock today in that second ODI was the only highlight of it for me, apart from of course the hat trick as well, right? Um, but it kind of feels like when they go away, there is no momentum amongst the more casual fan. Look, we understand if you listen to this, if you're watching this show, you like us are on top of anything, right? And these guys don't have to bowl, and girls don't have to bowl or ball or hit a ball when one of us will be watching it somewhere around the world, right? But most of the kind of momentum comes from the casual fans, right? And that just doesn't exist with these white ball tours. And it's totally kind of, in a way, I think there's this kind of idea that actually you can just get them there to kind of, I don't want to say they have a good time, because I know they work really hard and they're professionals, but maybe not have the plans in place that they need, that we'd expect to see if New Zealand were when New Zealand rocked up in Sri Lanka not that long ago, right? To go, right, how do we get them out at home? Where's their weaknesses? Where do we bowl to Ratchin? Like, what do we do to all of it? And that's what I think is frustrating. And I also think it's just a general kind of shows of typical of kind of lower standards, because what's going to happen is we're going to rock up for this World Cup, and I know it's a T20 World Cup, and maybe we're slightly better at T20 than ODI at the moment. I think that's debatable, and we're not going to do the homework. We're not going to have the plans in place. We're not going to be ready, and we're going to get embarrassed at another home World Cup unless something changes. And I think those are that comes from the top, right? And actually, from everything you hear about Sanath, you hear he's a disciplinarian. He's all about standards. But I think there's a kind of final piece of that jigsaw that we're kind of missing at the moment. And I think the analysts, the brain tank, whatever they want to call it this week, needs to figure out what that piece is, do it sharpish, and Sri Lanka need to be competitive away from home and a team that people fear playing.
I'll just add to that, Mark. New Zealand looked a lot more prepared for the conditions we put on, even though they're just as foreign to them as their home conditions are to us. And it was a much closer run series, right? We've really gotten pasted these first two ODIs, and you just look at how New Zealand batted. Will Young and Rachin Ravindra have not been troubled at all. They made it look really, really easy. And that brings me to kind of a second point where we're pointing fingers at the Sri Lankan batting, which we should justifiably do, bearing in mind that both Kusal Patham and Charith, none of whom have scored runs in this series, have all been in good one-day form and have been performing really well. So that's something that is frustrating to see. But the bowling has lacked bite, to be honest. And you have those first 10 overs where New Zealand has really taken a big bite out of our batting lineup. And we just simply are not able to produce that kind of incisive power play bowling to do that. And part of it is, I think, again, Mark, it ties to your point about think tank. You need to figure out which bowlers bowl where. I think right now they're just selecting who they kind of think are the best selection, who can kind of fill out the batting lineup. But we're talking 8 overs in, and Charith is bowling, and he's bowling 4 overs on the trot, right? That cannot be plan A. That could maybe be plan C.
Dom, I'll stop you there. We know what plan A is, Asita Fernando. Like, we're just going to bowl him into the ground, right? Like, Asita Fernando is going to solve all our problems. And sure, I'll let you carry on. I'm just a bit frustrated.
Yeah, no. I mean, I think I was about to get to the point, right? Asita averages 26 in Test cricket. His average is 44 in ODI cricket, and this raises the question: Dushmantha Chamira is playing at home. Dilshan Madushanka is at home. There are talented. They dropped Lahiru Kumara after one match. There are talented seamers who are capable of taking wickets at the top level. Like, I would think that this is a tour you'd want to include someone like Dilshan Madushanka. You've got swing, you've got bounce, you've got carry, and he's shown that he can take advantage of that. And I really kind of am concerned about how they're managing this sort of spate of fast bowlers. We've said multiple times, Sri Lanka has never had the depth of talent when it's come to fast bowling as they do now. But I'm just not sure that they're using it properly. To just cite one more example, Eshan Malinga, who you can see the talent. You can see why he's rated very highly. And he's bowling quick. He's got good pace. He's got a good attitude. But I tend to think that, if they that he should have probably gotten a go in the T20s, as opposed to the 50 over format, because it's a very different thing, right? A very different. And I'm not saying that he can't do that, but I think that management, that thinking about how do we attack this game. And I thought Wanindu and Mahesh bowled well. I thought they bowled pretty well overall, given the conditions. I thought Wanindu has improved his bowling faster and flatter. He's not getting hit around as much. But the pace bowlers are suffering. And that, again, ties to the question of conditions, right? If you're basically useless in white ball games at home, what opportunity you're then put under pressure when you go to a place like New Zealand. And again, to go back to the T20 series, someone like Matisha Pathurana, right? He has a rough first game. He's better in the second game. And then they drop him for the third game. I just think that it is very, very bad management of their fast bowling resources. And I think that can be linked to conditions. If you're only using them on these away series, then you're not going to learn how and when they can be useful for you as a side.
Yeah, it just points to me of there's not much long-term thinking. I mean, Estelle, you've talked so much about the example from 2019 and how they should have used that plan, and they just didn't. Are we sleepwalking into the same thing?
Yeah, that's the thing, right? Like when Dom is talking about Eshan Malinga and talking about the fast bowlers that are back home, you think about ODI cricket, Sri Lanka's not in the Champions Trophy. So they have to wait until 2027 for their next major ODI competition, right? So it is a time where you have the opportunity to give players chances to get into that lineup. I mean, you've got plenty of time to work with these players. I mean, Sri Lanka ended up playing the most number of ODIs, if I'm not mistaken, last year, despite not being in the Champions Trophy. I don't know. I'm not sure how many they have scheduled for this year, but it is an opportunity to give players opportunities in overseas conditions, and particularly, as you mentioned, the fast bowlers who don't really have that much of a role to play in Sri Lanka. The other concern for me is, of course, I mean, we've brought it up many, many times about Asita Fernando. There's a test series coming up, right? Which I would assume he would be, uh, if they do go with one pace bowler, he's probably going to be the one pace bowler they go with, right? So he's going to have to carry a heavy workload, even if it's two quicks. You still have a heavy workload in front of you, in difficult, like, I mean, taxing conditions, right? So that's I mean, I know it's a point we've repeated many, many times, but like, what is there to gain by kind of running him into the ground, playing every format of the game? It just, I mean, smarter people in administration obviously have some idea about it, but it is quite kind of baffling to kind of the casual viewer as to why when the depth is so, when you have such a depth of talent in the fast bowling arena, especially, like, I mean, even if you don't think of, the guys who've already played, there are plenty of fast bowlers that you can bring into the side, right? And if you look at New Zealand, a lot of the success are from these tall, lanky kind of fast bowlers, right? Because they're getting the ball to kind of rise up on the batters. And like Dom mentioned, I mean, I will admit I haven't been able to watch every single delivery of the series because it starts way too early for me. But uh, but like, it's there's a clear difference in how the bowling attack looks in Sri Lanka versus how it looks here, right? Where basically even today, a lot of the wickets came like because New Zealand were trying to accelerate and they were being caught out in the deep. Even the hat trick ball, right? He went for a six. He wasn't trying to play it down or protect his wicket or anything like that. So it's, you can't necessarily say it's good bowling. It's just a natural consequence of, at the end of the innings, you're going to get a couple of wickets, depending on how the batters go about it. So that is, that has to be a concern because you've got the talent. I think still, if you look at Sri Lanka's white ball squads and actually even the red ball squads, if you look at player by player, there is the talent to make a good team is there, right? It's about developing the skills required, how in a way that is being used in modern day cricket, right? Like, if you look at India's success in Australia, it's, you forget Bumrah, he's a freak, right? But everything else came from players or bowlers who were able to do something different to what they would have done in India, right? And that the way they develop those skills is by making conditions in their country, not in every venue. You don't have to do it in every venue, right? You can have it, and Sri Lanka has the kind of, I think we have the setup to do that, where you can have, like, Dambulla is a really good batting track. You have Ketarama as your spinning track. You produce something different in Candy. It doesn't have to be everything is low and slow and play everything in low and slow conditions. We can have a variety of things or conditions available as well. So it's, I don't know. I mean, people are going to say we are negative, but like, there has to be some kind of thinking behind what we're doing, right? What's the plan? Like, if you're looking at 2027, then how are we going to go about this? Are we thinking that Janit Liyanage, Chaminda Wickramasinghe, that's going to be our lower middle order? Is Kaminu Mendy going to be batting in the lower middle order? Does he have the game where he can take, games away from other teams by going berserk at the end? All those things, are we really thinking about it, or is it just about, like Dom said, picking the best player, like the players who you think are most, at the top of their game, not thinking about the roles that they need to play for the team?
Estelle, I'll add mentality is a huge part of it, right? Like you're playing where par is sub 250. The very nature of how you play those games is different, right? You look at Will Young and Rachin Ravindra; they're looking to score right from the jump. They're not looking to survive; they're looking to score. And you know, my thought is, if we can't even bat out 50 overs, we fail to bat out 50 overs or 37 overs in this
37.
second. But why not be more aggressive? Right, because the conservative strategy is not helping you. At least you'll get a big score every once in a while when someone goes off and gets in. And I think the difference you see is that Sri Lankan batters allow themselves to be bold too. New Zealand batters dictate terms, and I think when they're in the T20 mode, people like Nissanka and Kusal and even Asalanka switch that mode and say, okay, I'm going to dictate terms to the bowlers here, and maybe not as aggressively as some of the other teams in the world do it, but they still do it. And just the impetus of that mentality is really important. And I think also the players need to play for the team and not themselves, because I think Estelle, you brought this up, getting a 50. Who cares? It's completely useless in this situation, right? Try to score runs, try to make a difference, do what you need to do to win, not to sort of save face or maintain respectability, because never winning an away series at home is not respectability.
I mean, people will listen to us and be like, we're being negative and this is what we wanted and this is what we told you about. I just think, I really hope the takeaway messages is actually we all want the best for Sri Lanka, and we want to see our team win. I think it's almost more important now than at any time in Sri Lanka's history, opposed to maybe in the kind of late 70s period when we were considered for full member status of the ICC, that we are putting a good show on and we are winning matches at home and away and in all formats. Because if you look at the news this week and kind of wider cricket news, there's all this talk about a two-tier test divisions and all that. You know, Sri Lanka will be in the top division in the first round of it when it starts. But I just think we've got to be realistic here. I think there's a lot of people out that would be, would just think Division Two is all right for us. Sri Lanka are B plus players. We're not. We're like up there at the top table. There is nowhere in the world where cricket is more popular and cricket is more loved. Pound for pound, we're right up there with everyone else, right? And we need to be at that top table. We deserve to be at that top table. But if we don't ever win away from home, it's going to be difficult for us to sit here and argue. Even though we produced all these great players, we've had all these magical moments where everyone's favourite second team, that we need to be in the top division if it ends up going that way, right, guys?
Actually, like, I remember in one of our previous episodes also there was this comment saying that, look, even when Sangakkara, Murali, all of them played, we were not successful overseas. But that's not the point, right? It's about getting better. You don't say we've never won there before, so who cares, right? It's about always trying to get better. And I think, to be fair, I think the test team is kind of shaping up, or I mean, I don't know how much that's going to change in the next cycle, because you've got a lot of like mid to late 30s players, but like the test team is shaping up well, right? You've got your spin bowling options, and Prabhat was really good in South Africa, and you've got your pace bowling options who are good. You've got 3-4 options there. The batting has generally been all right. They haven't been exceptional. I mean, in England they were good, not so much in South Africa. So I think the red ball team certainly has kind of, they are at a certain standard, but you always want to be doing better and winning. You want to be doing better than the previous, generations, right? And you have all the resources to do that. Like, maybe previous generations didn't have some of the things that the current players have, right? So you want to be going out there and doing that. I don't think you should, if you go into a series, and I think, I mean, I've had to follow with the India Australia series a lot, but like a lot of what I'm hearing from that is also that, India went into this thinking that, they're gonna get beaten, right? Or that or the messaging from the coach at press conferences is like, oh, look, we were 1-1 going into the fourth test. That's an achievement. I think that mentality needs to stop for Sri Lanka. We always have that, right? Where, and I think people said that after the South Africa series as well, like after giving a fight in the second games, like, we competed really well. How long is that? Are you willing to accept that as okay, right? You need to go beyond competing and start winning. Like, you don't go into a game like you mentioned before about Camilo Mendes's 50, right? It gives you respectability, but in the grand scheme of things, it's just a 50 under his name, right? It doesn't have an impact, and I'm not blaming him. I know there were 5 wickets down for nothing, but you have to start thinking differently, and I think that is an area that Sri Lanka need to work on. The mentality, as Dom said, right? You have to start thinking beyond. We are the small guys. It's okay if we are just there and thereabouts. No one expects us to win anything. So what, right? We need to start thinking beyond that, because I think if you look around the world, genuinely, right, as a batting side, if you look at Test cricket in particular, because one day cricket, in limited overs cricket, we've been left behind in terms of power. But like if you look at Test cricket, what are the strong batting lineups in the world right now? I don't know. Like every squad seems to have their weaknesses, right? If you look at Australia, they have their holes. Is Kavaja done? Steve Smith hasn't been
Constas as
as
a
good.
whole as well. The
Yeah,
whole opening is a whole, right?
Manas.
Yeah.
And like Travis Head is a hit or miss, right? One day he's going to give you 180, the next day he's going to be zero. India similarly, is Rohit done? Is Virat done? I mean, they've got players in the wings, but I'm saying currently players who are playing. So it is it's not a place where you can say, oh no, they're far ahead of us, we can't catch up. It's something that you need to also decide. Like, you don't go into a game thinking if we get 200 that's enough, but you need to go in thinking that we want to win, and anything less than that is not good enough.
Yeah, I think this is a combination of what Mark and Estelle said, right? It would be one thing if the talent wasn't there, if
Mhm.
the resources weren't there.
And I think, sorry to butt in, Tom, but I think when in terms of talent, I think pre-COVID there was a period where they were stuck for players, right? They didn't have. I mean, you had Milinda Sirivardhana, Jeevan Mendes going to a World Cup in England, so there was a period where it was thin,
And
but
I completely agree with you because I think 2019, 2018, you can say things like that. Okay, they didn't have the talent pool. They've grown the talent pool, and that's a credit to them for growing the talent pool. But now it's time to give them the winning mentality to unlock it at the highest level, not just at home, right? It's time to take it. And I think this is what made those teams, from the late 90s to the, mid 2000s and 10s so good is that they begged, borrowed, and stole their way to wins. I
Mhm.
would say pound for pound, you could argue the current teams have more talent in them than those iterations, as great as the players were. But they used every bit of knowledge, right? So, okay, maybe we don't have the power that they do, but we're going to play strategically to take advantage of that. And this is a funny kind of moment, and this reminded me maybe a week and a half ago. Wisden ran a story about how Dinesh Chandimal helped Sri Lanka win the World Cup by dropping himself, right? And so he dropped himself, and who came in? It was Lahiri Thirumanna, and who's still in our T20 squad? Dinesh Chandimal, more than a decade off from that, right? The fact that we haven't changed our mentality towards T20 cricket, right, which is evolving ever so quickly, right? It's every year there's new trends, new approaches. You see what India is doing with their batting. If you're not on the front lines thinking about how am I going to combat that, and instead you're thinking, okay, how do we win a series at home and make conditions so that our players can play well, you're going to go further and further behind. And I think it's up to someone like Charith as a captain to say, you know what, enough with this. I want to move the team forward. I really want to move the team forward. And admittedly, Upal Taranga said that in 2025 they're going to try to make more sporting wickets for home matches, that they wanted to renew the confidence of the player.
I think what he said though was that they want to create. I don't know if I'm talking about the same interview. Is that he said they want to make sporting wickets at the domestic level, so that at domestic level players play there and get accustomed to that, every type of condition, and then internationally it's probably going to be kind of the same as what we've seen. So yeah, I mean, how much domestic cricket do these guys play, right?
Yeah. And you almost hope, and Marcus said this many times, that they just get taken away to these leagues around the world so that they can actually
Mhm.
learn their trade. And we've seen how much
I,
Patirana and Deekshana and players like that have improved.
I've said that extensively, and I'll be watching it today. I was watching it with my dad, and I said Isham Malinga is going to be a totally different player by the time he comes back from the IPL. But also, that is all true, but that cannot be the method, right? The method
Yeah.
has got to be the system. The system is well funded. The system has a lot of people working within it. Has to create players that have the talent, the wherewithal, and the mentality needs to be in place to get that kind of winning, the wins happening, right? There's kind of two more points I want to finish on about this side, about this series, is that I think now this our white ball squad, kind of core the squad, kind of Patam Kusal, Charith, Hasaranga Tikshana, that feels to me like the kind of core of it have been everywhere once, and at least once, and now I think from this point on, I'm sure someone's going to get in the comments and say, "Oh, but they haven't been to the West Indies or something." That's not true. I remember them going to the West Indies just after COVID as well. Passer made his debut in the West Indies.
Mm.
Now, from this point on, I think there's no excuses, right? You guys either kind of sort this out, figure it out, show us how you can win, and how you're going to win, and how you're going to be competitive, and get us back to where we need to be, or I think maybe think about moving them on, and bring a different batch in. My other kind of closing remark on this will be this time last year, I think Wani had just been made captain. Angelo was back in all formats. Angelo sitting in, it was kind of Captain Wani, Uncle Angelo, and ultimately it was a project that failed miserably in New York. However, it was exciting cricket, right? And when he was up in people's faces, getting fined by umpire, losing. I don't think he earned a penny because he lost all his match fees every time he did play. When he eventually wasn't on the suspension, we were going hell for leather. It was all or nothing, right? And I wonder if
He came back to
actually,
Test cricket.
yeah, he came back to Test cricket. He was so inspired by it. I wonder if actually, we were kind of somewhat premature with taking not necessarily the captaincy away from him, but moving away from that brand of cricket. Because I wonder if now it's a little bit too conservative, and I wonder if Charity might consider, Sanath might consider, the think tank might consider pivoting back to that more kind of full-blooded heavy metal cricket again.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, he had 5 months as captain, and I think
To be fair though, Sri Lankan captains age like dogs, so 5 months is actually like
a
30 in
long
human
time, very
years.
long time.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
But I wholeheartedly agree. I think in the T20, and it's interesting, right? So Charith as captain versus Wanindu as captain. Wanindu has seen much more T20 cricket internationally, and I mean
Mhm.
that both in the sense of T20I, but also in the sense of the international leagues, and really has his pulse on the way that cricket is developing, right? Um, and it also it speaks to the way that expectations work. Like, we always want the quick fix, we want the quick solution.
Mm.
And with this, you have to, it's the process that matters. It's the process. You have to be committed to a process, and that's why someone, and people will probably slay me in the comments because of this, but Mahela, for all his problems, has a plan. right? Had a plan,
Yeah.
had an approach, was building from ground up. And when Sanath got hired, that was one of the questions we asked was, what is that plan? Where's the long-term future? It's not about winning 1 or 2 games. It's about fostering Sri Lanka cricket's place in the world and making use of the talent and the resources that they have. And that to me is sort of it's so easy to win victories by saying, oh yeah, we had a bad World Cup, we'll sack him and bring in a new, we'll sack Mahela, we'll sack Silverwood, we'll sack Wani, and we'll bring in a new coach. And then you have the little honeymoon period, and now it's like, well, what do we do? So I think there needs to be some clear long-term planning and commitment to a group of players who have been committed to and who we know have the skill set to do it. It's one thing if, Jeevan Mendes was still out there and you're like, okay, this is not what we want to be doing. But yeah.
Yeah, and like if you look at Sri Lanka's like recent past, right, from the 2021 World Cup, T20 World Cup, that's when everyone started talking about, oh look, Sri Lanka have an exciting, the makings of an exciting T20 team. It's just that next step that they can't take, right? They're always in that, oh look, exciting talent. They've got Mahesh, they've got Matisha, they've got Wanindu, they've got Patum, they've got Kusal Mendes, Charith Asalanka, all exciting talents. But how do we go from being talented and having the potential to be great and actually reaching that level? I think that would be the biggest thing. I want to make a joke about Wanindu. I mean, his leadership doesn't suit Sri Lanka because he doesn't tuck his shirt in and wears colored sneakers and colors his hair, right? So that will never work. They need the disciplinarian. They need a guy who will make you know, how it is like in schools where you have to put the side part and you can't have like your hair can't be too short and all of that, right? That's the kind of mentality I think a lot of people look to when things are not going well. But if you look at Sri Lanka's history in the sport, right, that flamboyance is what has brought us success in every way, right? You look at Sanat, look at Aravinda, you look at someone like Murali, Ajanta Mendes. They're not, good schoolboy type, that type of players in terms of cricket, right? They are the unorthodox, they are the aggressors, they are the ones who go against the grain. And I'm sure if Nick was there, he could name like 1,000 names from, the 70s and
Arjuna.
80s who like
Arjuna.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. They don't fit the bill as, I mean, though Arjuna had a bit of those tucking the shirt in, those type of things, right? So curbing that aggression, I do think that maybe Hasaranga would be able to be his best, the best version of himself, not as a leader, but as a player in the team. Because he's, already your best player, right? So, or maybe second best player now behind Patum, but you want him to be able to harness all of that and put it into his performance rather than worrying about the captaincy. But that style of play, I don't think should be curbed, right? Like if you look at teams around the world, you look at like someone like now I can't remember his name, England's number 5 in the Test team, Harry Brook, right? Where did he come from? And like he's never been told stop doing that, stop playing the way you're playing. And his success has come because he's playing that way. You look at Rishabh Pant, right? And all the criticism he got for playing that shot, the stupid comment from Sunil Gavaskar, and the next innings, I think he proved a point to them in that in the Sydney game, he made like I think 40 of 90 balls, and in the next innings he made 60 of 30, right? Because you have the talent to do that. And I think if you look at the Sri Lankan lineup, you have players who can do things like that. It's about going beyond being that conservative self and wanting to just be competitive, right?
100% agreed. You think of, yeah, Estelle, funny story that you mentioned the side part. I used to, before, when I had hair, every day used to have my hair combed into a side part, which my hair didn't do. But it just reminds me of this conservative like at the end of the year, the numbers will look good because we played conservatively.
Exactly.
And you look at someone, I think the antithesis of this is Travis Head, right? He's a match winner. It doesn't matter what his numbers say. Glenn Maxwell, he's a match winner. Doesn't matter that he averages 34 in ODI cricket. He's played the greatest all-time innings in ODI cricket. Those guys do a job. They don't accumulate. They do a job. They fill that role, and if it doesn't come off, do you see Pat Cummins worried when and Bumrah nicks off Travis Head? No, he's not concerned at all. He knows that's how the game is meant to be played. And I think of all people, it's interesting that Sanath doesn't appreciate that. Because again, you look at his numbers, obviously they're great, but he averages 32 in ODI cricket. That's in terms of how much of a match winner he was. That means not like the average doesn't mean anything, right? He won so many games on the back of his blade, playing how like his brand of cricket relentlessly, even if every other game he holds the career record for, but it didn't matter because when he played his own game, he unleashed a potential. He was a match winner of the kind that the country had never seen.
Guys, I think we need to wrap this up now, but I think what we're saying is the Sri Lanka need to just let the genie out of the bottle. Like, stop playing the polite tourist, and like actually let's just start going for it. It's 2025, lads. You're in the prime of your life, in the prime of your careers. Like you're wearing a shirt that wears heavy upon your shoulders, no doubt, but you've got to go out and do it. Create your own history in it. I think I'm not good enough at anything to represent any country, anything. But I imagine once you get to the pinnacle where you're playing international cricket, I think it's easier to get there than it is to actually perform in it, and that's the kind of challenge. But I think that the sad part for all of us is we know we're playing within ourselves, and we kind of just want fling it all up in the air and absolutely go for it. I think that's the kind of Murali end message to the Sri Lanka side for whatever that's worth. Not much. No doubt you'll get into the comments and ask me and Dom how we did our side passings at school because once upon a time we both did have hair. Yeah, I don't need to send pictures. Your kids won't sleep if they see them. But we'll be in the Murali end. Thank you for listening. Hit the subscribe. Tell all your friends about us. Leave us comments. We love hearing what you say. Join the WhatsApp channel. Join the newsletter. Of course, there's a big test series happening in a couple of weeks' time. Australia are coming to Gaul. 2 test matches plus a random ODI that they've pegged onto the end. I imagine the Australians are quite desperate for it. Because they'd love to get some practice on Asian pitches before the Champions Trophy. We, of course, won't be involved in it. But I'm sure, what was it? Someone tweeted? We should have opted out of it.
Opted out.
Opted out.
Just like Rohit.
Yeah, just like Rohit, which is a lovely way of putting it. But yeah, thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. See you all soon. Bye.